Hello, this is Brian Purdy with the Florida Aviation Network. Today we're at the 19th Annual Vertical Flight Society Electric Aircraft Symposium. And today we're visiting with Randy Gawenda of FRASCA, and we're going to talk a little bit about powered lift and what that's going to look like in the future. Good morning, Randy. How are you doing?
Good morning, Brian.
So, have you given this presentation at EAS before?
No, I've not actually. Yesterday was the first one, so you guys got the beta version of that speech.
Great. Well, give us a little rundown of it and any of the highlights that you want to tell us about. Let's go for it.
Yeah, so essentially we wanted to kind of take an overview of the powered lift pilot training requirements, the way it was laid out in the SFAR 120, FAR Part 194 now, and actually take a look at the practicalities of that. What does that entail? And I think the big question for a lot of the industry right now is we don't have a candidate, a good pool of powered lift pilot instructors now. Mm-hmm. So the biggest question is, how do we generate that? How do we get to that point? Because that's going to be key and be pivotal obviously, to moving forward with the industry.
Yeah. And we've talked, it seems like a lot are either out of the Osprey with the military or the actual OEMs themselves doing that initial training. So that's going to potentially be a slowdown to depending upon how many people they are expecting to need right away.
Correct, and we do expect some out of the V-22 community, and some of those folks are with OEM manufacturers now as far as that goes, but that still needs to kind of get ramped up, so to speak, and especially as, if we're talking about the quantities and things like that some of the forecasts are looking at, that could be a potential bottleneck to that.
So I guess about the only thing we have going for us is that it's going to take a while for them to have enough of the aircraft where a pilot shortage is going to impact them. So hopefully they both can grow at the same time.
Correct, and I think, as we kind of move forward, some of the things that we've talked about in terms of, pilot time in general, some of the things that we need to see that will help facilitate that, it will kind of manage itself, just over the sheer physics and economy of things like that. But when we get to the point when as we move forward, and we're talking, some years in the future as well, too, is, I kind of likened it a little bit to driver's ed, right? Where we all kind of grew up and sat along in mom and dad's car long enough to kind of know, hey, these are the rules of war, these are what's going on. And now you have a 16-year-old that can drive however many people, in a car wherever they want. It's a little bit different now, but at least with some measured pace, because again, we still want to maintain, the utmost of safety as a foremost aspect in our goal.
Okay. So I know now there are some flight schools where they start from zero time and then get you all the way up to, CFI and stuff like that. I'm thinking that's going to be a while before powered lift is able to do anything like that.
I think so. I think the way that the SFAR is currently organized and the lack of powered lift candidates and instructors and things like that is definitely going to hinge on that. But I think that's also a great opportunity to kind of enable some of that pipeline is those pathway programs of, how do we give pilots good, relevant operating experience, so that way when they're ready to move to a turbojet category aircraft or something like that, they've already got a good operational footprint. They've worked with, highly integrated flight decks, and granted, we're still not. I don't think we're taking into account simplified vehicle operations. I mean, I've flown several of the simulators from the eVTOL manufacturers, and it's quite simple. I kind of feel like there's really not a lot of us that can't get in there and do this, quite honestly.
Yeah, I was just going to ask, okay, someone that's wanting to get into it, but right now all they can do is fixed wing, maybe helicopter. What would be the best approach? But it almost sounds like, no, you're going to just be really good at video games.
That definitely helps, and part of it too, like we're talking with some of my colleagues at lunch too, is the output of a lot of this is autonomous as well too, of where there is no pilot. And so we were talking about, remote piloting and drone piloting and things like that. And so it's going to be a transition for sure. And I think from just a public acceptance standpoint, right, you're going to end up with a pilot in the cockpit for quite a while. So that's kind of the near-term problem. The longer-term problem is going to be how do we transition, away from that, because inevitably that's probably where it's going to go.
And I know from when I was in the Air Force, they didn't think much of us navigators, but they liked the pilots, and then now they're getting rid of the pilots too. But it's still the navigators with dispatchers and stuff like that. So there will always be some level of human control, I would think, at least checking things off until AI gets to the point where they're taking care of everything. But, there'll be dispatcher potential for building the flights, especially if it's totally autonomous. Okay, you're starting from where they're parking to taking off to flying and landing.
Absolutely, and some of that mindset is changing in the military because of some of the current conflicts. The way we employ drones and do military tactics nowadays is quite a bit different, in many theaters than, traditional warfare used to be, where it was always, the soldier was part of the asset, so to speak, where that's no longer the case. Again, it takes a while for that mentality to filter through, a generation or two. But, I've seen similar things in the Air Force with just their remoted pilot, the RPA program, and just acceptance amongst the other pilot community, because the tendency was like, well, you're not a real pilot because you don't fly the aircraft. Well, is that really true or not?
Yeah. No, I've seen it with some of the other remote piloting things where they were actually going to be able to count remote piloting as logging time as if they were in the aircraft themselves. Do you think that might get to this situation also?
It may. I think especially as we work towards more autonomous type systems, that's definitely going to be the way that it has to go. Practical experience, I think, is still really, really, really critical, especially for like I said, the near future as far as that goes. And I see less pilot time isn't the biggest indicator of success, or whether you're a good pilot or not, quite honestly. Recency of experience, because I think a lot of people tend to treat pilot time as a homogenous, total blanket of, well, you've got 10,000 hours, so you're good at everything, right? Well, no, if you've got 10,000 hours of ag flying, you're really good at ag flying, but you haven't shot an ILS in 8 years, so you're going to do horribly, right? And we kind of treat it with the same blanket treatment, and it would be, my personal objective after watching lots and lots of pilots in the aircraft and in the sim is going, recency of experience really is the most critical factor in terms of success and safety. So even if you get away from doing flying for a while just in general, and you really want to power pack, and get yourself back up to a recency of experience, you have to do a lot, but you can do it in a fairly short amount of time. You're not starting from scratch, but I feel like that recency of experience with that particular discipline, whether it's flying a drone, whether it's flying a 747, whether it's flying an F-16, I mean, if you're doing it every day, that's one thing.
Yeah.
But when you have those gaps in operational experience, that's usually when the safety factors tend to start to get a little fuzzy, and like, this operation maybe isn't as sound as it should be.
So do you think? So you're with flight safety right now, and they're doing a lot of simulator training, and usually the airlines to do the emergency procedures that you don't want to do in the aircraft. Will these other aircraft be brought into under flight safety to be able to help get people with that recency?
It's possible, and I think as we look at our business plans and operations, I think we're open to all of those sectors, because training is kind of the key to all of that, and that's something that flight safety is focused on ever since its inception as far as that goes. So having a good pilot or having a good operator, you always want that good output. The path to get there, I mean, especially developing the tools, the curriculum, the classroom aids and stuff like that is all part of that. That's not going to go away, whether whether it's a traditional model or something more down the road as far as that goes. So I do see that as being another kind of outgrowth or another vertical within our business training areas.
Okay. I'm looking forward to seeing how this new powered lift grows. I'd like to get into it myself, and now I need to worry about my recency of experience. Anything else that you'd like to mention that we haven't covered in depth?
Really, for the most part, I think we've covered everything pretty well. But in our work with Archer and some of the other manufacturers, we kind of have a good perspective to be tied in with this sector and with this industry to really understand the needs of what's going to have to transpire in the next couple of years in order to enable a lot of this activity. So it's been interesting to see the FAA pivot and really kind of focus on this because it is, it's growth. But again, safety is a predominant factor that we want to ensure, like we maintain that factor as being the highest objective of what we want. But we also have to think differently. And sometimes, humans fair change, we're not great at that. It takes effort, it takes work. There's no two ways around it. But I think with the industry and the team and the support of the FAA, I think they're well positioned to do that.
Okay. Well, thank you very much, Randy. We've got our next session to get back to, but thank you very much for spending some time with us.
Thanks, Brian. My pleasure.
Thank you. And once again, this is Brian Purdy with the Florida Aviation Network, live and in the clear from the 19th Annual Vertical Flight Society Electric Aircraft Symposium. Have a great day.